Hey, this is Heidi Dawson. If you love all things health and wellness and style of any kind, hang out here with me each week. I'm obsessed with never-ending improvement, and it's all in an effort to help each one of us live a wildly successful lifestyle. Subscribe today so you don't miss a thing. Hi, guys. Welcome to episode 484 of the Wildly Successful Lifestyle Podcast. What's going on? I hope you're spending a little time each day working on your mindset in some way. I know twice a week we get to do it together, but the other days of the week need mindset work too. Maybe a 5 to 10 minute meditation or journaling, maybe just a 10-minute walk in nature, something to help you be mindful for a little bit each day. It's sort of the law of compounding interest. It pays off big time when you do it. Okay, so how many of you guys have a thermostat somewhere in your house? I'm just going to answer for all of us. We all do. I have several different thermostats. The one that adjusts our heat and air, a couple food thermometers, and we have human thermometers as well that are digital. Now, I remember growing up, my parents would take our temperature with one that was basically a thin glass tube that was filled with mercury, and it would rise or fall with our temperature. So if we had a fever, it would rise, and if we were feeling better, it would lower, it would come down. So whatever the temperature of its environment, the mercury would rise or fall with it. When conditions change, it sort of flowed with it. Now, unfortunately, a lot of us operate our life like a thermometer. Our self-esteem rises and falls with the opinions of others. So Eric and I have been watching Ted Lasso. I don't know if you guys have seen it. It's really good. At first, I thought it was going to be silly, but it really has so many good moments and some really teachable things. But there's a guy named Nate who is extremely affected by what others do or say about him. I mean, if it's good, he's on cloud 9, but if it's bad, he's something different than cloud 9. But they show him just kind of living off the highs of what people on social media would say about him when it's good. But when they say negative things, it just turns his whole world upside down, making him very miserable. And I gotta say, I can really relate. I've been there where when things are going good or someone maybe has complimented me, I feel like I'm on cloud 9. But if I going through a time where somebody has said something negative, or maybe they just haven't said anything at all, and I think, oh, well, everything must be going bad, or the design is terrible, or my hair looks bad. I used to be really bad about that. I mean, I was basically doing what I was talking about earlier, operating like a thermometer. My mood would rise and fall depending on the temperature of the people around me, meaning what other people thought about me actually meant a lot. Now, I was good at hiding it, so people weren't necessarily aware, but it really did affect me. And here's the thing, not that people would even say mean things to me. I don't generally invite that kind of attention, but if they simply didn't compliment me, I would create what they were thinking in my own head. And we know that's not good, not usually anyway. We are our own worst enemies when we try to mind read. We're our own worst enemies when we put weight at all into what other people think about us, because we have no idea what they're thinking. And like Wayne Dyer always said, and I will take this with me everywhere I go, is what other people think about me, that's none of my business. I love that, and I try to live by that. And as I was thinking about this episode, I thought back to how growing up we were trained pretty well to really care only about what other people thought. Everything from what I wore, how I wore my hair, what I talked about, who I spent time with, to how many hours I spent in religious service. We were constantly being measured and counseled and told how to act. Literally, it didn't matter who we were. It only mattered how we presented. As long as you presented according to their ideology, we were golden. Now, not too many could actually live up to their rules without losing their mind, or at least their sense of self. So in essence, we were taught to hide who we actually were so that we could be what they thought we should be. And how you presented better be what they wanted, or you would get hauled into the back room for counsel. So we were being conditioned to conform to someone else's expectation, regardless of what we ourselves thought. I mean, we were taught that our worth depended on what other people thought. Now, that's a recipe for disaster on a personal level if you don't eventually untrain that conditioning. I mean, it could cause you to just never trust yourself, or worse, to not even think for yourself at all. Now, most of us know someone who's extremely insecure. I mean, they're often pretty miserable because they've relinquished power over their own feelings. They've turned over to others the power to judge themselves. I think all of us at some level have been taught that we should conform in a way to what our society or culture expects in order to go along to get along. Do we have to conform to be an upstanding member of society? There's something interesting about mercury that I learned this week. So not only will it move with the environment, not only does it go up and down with the environment, but it also can remain separate from it. For instance, did you know that mercury can't be absorbed by a towel? I didn't know that, not until recently. I watched an experiment where this person had a bowl full of mercury and they dropped several drops of red dye into the bowl and they stirred it around with their hands. They had gloves on. So they stirred it around and the red dye got all in the mercury. And then they took a hand towel and they put the towel in the bowl, and that towel absorbed every bit of the red dye, leaving the mercury completely unaffected. Now, minutes before, the mercury had had all this red dye mixed in, but they were able to absorb all the red dye out of that liquid mercury. All of it was absorbed by that towel, leaving the mercury completely unaffected. It was wild for me to watch. I had never seen that. I didn't know that. So the mercury and the red dye are separate elements, even though you can mix them together. But when you put the towel in the bowl, it pulls all the red dye out of the mercury completely. So we live in a world where the reality is we have other people that live alongside of us, and we're glad that they do. And sometimes, of course, we're affected by others. I wish I could say I'm so strong that I'm not affected, but that wouldn't be true. We are all at one point or another affected by the conditions around us. But ultimately, all of us have the ability, every single one of us has the ability to stay true to who we are in spite of that. We have the ability to separate ourselves from the opinion of others. So as John Templeton said, of course we want to be open to learn from others, but make a commitment to stay in control about our feelings, about ourself, and our estimate of our own self-worth. So remain in control of your own feelings, even though there are other opinions swirling around you. Eleanor Roosevelt said, "Remember, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent." And another quote that I love is, "Whoever will be free must make himself free. Freedom is no fairy gift to fall into a man's lap." So what is freedom? It's to have the will to be responsible for oneself. That's the power we each have, regardless of how we were conditioned. We've all been conditioned in some way, which means we can be reconditioned. You as an adult can recondition if need be, and that does take a lot of work, I know, because I'm still in the process of reconditioning. It takes thought work, it takes awareness, it takes a commitment to yourself to be true to what you know in your heart is right, regardless if someone else disagrees. And look, we don't have to do it alone. We have to remember that. When I was talking to Kevin, my trainer, about using the analogy of the red dye being completely absorbed by the towel, leaving the mercury unaffected, he said, okay, so the mercury is you and me, right? And the red dye is the opinions of others, right? And he said, so who or what is the towel? Now, it took that question that he asked took me back. And as I thought about it, I looked at him and he smiled because he knew I knew what he was going to say. The towel is God taking the burden from us. And when I said that, he said, exactly. That's the most important part of the story. None of us can handle everything on our own, but some of us act like we have to, but that's never true. I'm coming to know that, and I hope you are too. Sometimes we just have to let the hard things be handled by our higher power, whatever you believe that to be. My challenge to you this week is to consider the ways in which you've been taking on the weight of what other people think. You might ask yourself, hold on, what do I think? What feels right to me? Do I have my own back? Are you able to separate other people's opinions from your own? Now, for some people, it may feel heavy to do that, especially if your conditioning is strong. But when it feels too heavy, remember, you don't have to carry that burden alone. You can let some of that go to the universe or God or whatever you believe to be your higher power. That is always available to every single one of us. Share this with 3 people who deserve to live true to who they are. I love you guys. I'll talk to you in a few days. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends, because we're just going to keep going bigger and better places together, and I love that about us. Talk to you in a few days.